Elijah Crenshaw grabbed the prettiest woman in Ridgewater by the arm and shoved her off his porch. "I said no!" He slammed the door so hard the hinges screamed. Inside, his mother was clawing at her own bandages, screaming that the darkness was eating her alive. 20 women had come up that mountain. 20 women he'd thrown out. The only one who could save Ruth Crenshaw was the one the whole town called Buffalo Girl. And she was already saddling her mule in the dead of night, hands shaking, whispering to herself. "She wiped the mud off my face. I owe her my life." If this story touches your heart, subscribe to this channel right now and follow Hattie's journey to the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. Hit that bell so you never miss the next chapter. Now, let's begin. Next. Eli didn't look at the woman walking away. He didn't need to. She was already crying, her silk gloves pressed against her mouth, stumbling off the boardwalk in front of the whole town. "Mr. Crenshaw, please!" I said. Next. Ridgewater, Texas, had never seen anything like this. The richest cattleman in the territory stood on the boardwalk outside Patterson's saloon like a man buying horses at auction. Except he wasn't buying horses, he was looking for a wife. And he was failing at it the way only Elijah Crenshaw could fail. Violently. "You!" He pointed at the next woman in line. Margaret Dowling, banker's daughter, 19 years old, hands that had never touched dirt. Margaret stepped forward, her chin high, her mother nudging her from behind. "Can you birth a calf, Miss Dowling?" Excuse me?" "A calf. 800 pounds of cow trying to die on your barn floor at 3 in the morning, blood up to your elbows. Can you reach in and pull that calf out alive?" Margaret's face went white. Her mother grabbed her arm and pulled her backward. "How dare you speak to my daughter like that, you scarred animal!" Eli didn't blink. Next. 7 women came, 7 women left. Some crying, some cursing, some doing both. Eli rejected every single one in under 2 minutes each, and the questions never changed. Can you haul water? Can you shoot a rifle? Can you sit up 3 nights straight with a dying woman and not fall apart? Nobody could. Nobody even tried to answer. The last one in line was Delia Tate, Judge Cornelius Tate's daughter, the most beautiful woman in 3 counties. Golden hair, green eyes, a waist so narrow the other women whispered she must have had 2 ribs removed in San Antonio. Delia didn't wait for Eli's question. She walked straight up to him, close enough that her perfume hit him like a slap, and put her gloved hand on his chest. "Eli," she smiled. Slow. Practiced. "You don't need a farmhand. You need a wife. A real wife. Someone who can give you sons and make that cabin of yours worth living in. Stop this foolishness and take me home." Eli looked down at her hand on his chest. He picked it up by the wrist, gently, the way you'd pick up something dead, and set it back at her side. "Can you make a poultice for an infected wound, Miss Tate?" Delia laughed. "Darling, that's what doctors are for." Doctors. Eli's jaw tightened. The scar on his face pulled the corner of his mouth into something that wasn't a smile. "Your father's doctor, Whitfield. The finest physician in the territory." "The finest physician in the territory told me my mother will be blind by Christmas, and there's nothing he can do. So forgive me, Miss Tate, if I don't put much stock in doctors." He stepped around her, walked to his horse. The crowd parted like water around a stone. "You'll die alone, Elijah Crenshaw." Delia's voice cracked the morning air like a whip. The rejection had shattered something behind her perfect green eyes. "You and that blind old woman. No one will ever want you. Look at your face. You're a monster." Eli's hand froze on the saddle horn. His back was to her. The whole town was watching. 50 people. 100. every eye on the scarred man and the beautiful woman he'd just thrown away. He didn't turn around. "I'd rather be a monster than a liar, Miss Tate. And your father is the biggest liar in Texas." He mounted. He rode. The red dust swallowed him whole. Nobody noticed Hattie Mae Prescott. She was where she always was, in the gap between buildings, in the shadow where the sunlight didn't bother reaching. She had a basket of wet laundry on her hip, and lye burns on her fingers, and she'd heard every word. She wasn't thinking about Eli. She was thinking about what he'd said. "My mother will be blind by Christmas." "Hattie, you deaf girl? I said move!" Mrs. Gable's voice hit her from behind like a thrown rock. The boarding house owner stood in the back doorway, hands on her bony hips, mouth twisted into the permanent scowl she reserved for hired help and stray dogs. "Those sheets need hanging before noon, or I dock your pay." "Yes, ma'am." "And don't drip on my floor. You track enough mud through here to plant a garden." Hattie moved. She always moved when told. She carried the basket through the back door, across the kitchen, out to the clothesline. The basket weighed 60 pounds. She carried it one-armed. "Lord, look at her," whispered Abigail Fenton to her friend by the fence, not whispering at all, wanting to be heard. "Big as a barn and twice as plain. You think she entered Crenshaw's little bride contest?" The friend laughed. "She'd have broken the boardwalk." "Somebody ought to tell her. No amount of hard work makes up for looking like that." Hattie pinned a sheet to the line. Her hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking years ago. She'd heard it all before. Buffalo Girl. Big Hattie. Built like a freight wagon. The words used to cut. Now they just settled on her skin like dust. Always there. Never quite washing off. She worked until sundown. Mrs. Gable paid her 2 bits and told her not to come back until Monday because there wasn't enough work to justify her appetite. Hattie walked home through the back alleys. Her home was the lean-to behind her dead father's blacksmith shop. A cot, a stove, a trunk. One window that wouldn't close. She lit the stove. She boiled water. She sat on the cot and opened the trunk. The leather journal was underneath everything else, wrapped in oilcloth that smelled like her mother's hands. Ayanna Prescott, Cherokee, healer. Dead at 42 from a fever the town doctor refused to treat because she was Indian. Hattie opened the journal to a page she'd read so many times the ink was fading from the oil of her fingers. Eye infections, swelling, nerve damage, the slow creep of blindness. Her mother's handwriting. Golden seal root, ground fine. White oak bark, boiled to paste. Raw honey, unheated. Apply warm compress to closed eyes 3 times daily. The infection will fight, the body will burn, but the nerve remembers light. Give it reason to remember. Hattie closed the journal. She pressed it against her chest. 3 days ago, she'd been on her hands and knees scrubbing the courthouse steps. Doc Whitfield and Judge Tate had walked right past her, close enough to step on her fingers, talking like she was furniture. "The Crenshaw woman is finished," Whitfield had said. "Both eyes. I give it 3 weeks before she's completely blind." "And when she's blind?" The judge lit a cigar. His voice was casual, like a man discussing the weather. "Crenshaw breaks. He can't run 1,200 head of cattle and nurse a blind woman. He'll sell." "He won't sell to me. He hates me." "He won't have a choice. When Ruth goes blind, he'll need money for a caretaker, a proper house in town, medicine. I'll make him an offer on the copper land, below value. He'll take it because he won't have options." "And if he doesn't?" Whitfield had paused. Hattie heard him pull on the cigar. "Then we make his options worse." The judge laughed. They walked away. Hattie kept scrubbing. Her hands kept moving. but something in her chest had gone very, very still. Now she sat on her cot, holding her mother's journal, and the stillness was turning into something else, something hot. She could save Ruth Crenshaw's eyes. She was almost certain. The golden seal compress had worked on the Cherokee elder her mother had treated. The infection was the same. Wound contamination spreading to the eyes through the blood. The treatment was brutal, but effective. But Copper Hollow was 4 hours up into the hills. She didn't have a horse. She had Jonah, a mule older than the Republic who spooked at his own shadow. The trail was steep and dangerous, even in daylight. And Elijah Crenshaw had just thrown 20 women off his porch. What would he do to the woman the whole town called Buffalo Girl? Hattie stood up. She sat down. She stood up again. "This is crazy," she said out loud. She started packing anyway. Then she stopped. She put the saddlebag down. She sat on the cot and gripped her knees. "He'll laugh at you. He'll look at you and see what everyone sees. A fat girl playing doctor. He'll slam that door so hard it'll knock you off the porch, and you'll tumble down the mountain, and Jonah will eat wildflowers over your grave, and nobody will even notice you're gone." She stared at the wall. The stove cracked and popped. Then Ruth's voice came back to her, not from memory, from somewhere deeper. The biggest mountains stand the strongest when the storm comes. Hattie grabbed the saddlebag. She packed the journal, the golden seal paste, clean linen, a jar of raw honey, white oak bark wrapped in cheesecloth, and a canteen of boiled water. She pulled on her heaviest wool coat. The buttons strained across her chest. She didn't care. She went to Jonah's corral. The mule was asleep on his feet. "Get up, old man. We're going." Jonah opened one eye. "Don't look at me like that. I know." Jonah closed the eye. "She wiped the mud off my face, Jonah. She's the only one who ever did. I can't let her go blind in the dark. I can't." The mule snorted. Then, like he understood, he walked to the gate. They left Ridgewater at midnight. The town was dead. One lamp burning in the saloon, a dog barking somewhere far off. Nobody saw them go. The trail broke Hattie apart, piece by piece. The first hour was just steep, her thighs burning, her hands gripping the saddle horn, Jonah's hooves slipping on loose shale. The second hour got cold, bitter, bone-deep cold that cut through her wool coat like it was paper. Her fingers went numb. Her nose ran. She couldn't feel the reins. The third hour, Jonah stopped. Dead stop. Wouldn't move. Hattie climbed down and felt ahead with her boot. The trail had washed out. A gap of 3 feet, maybe 4, where the ground had simply slid away into the blackness below. She couldn't see the bottom. She stood at the edge of nothing, a fat woman on a dark mountain, and thought about turning back. "Nobody would blame you," she whispered. "Nobody even knows you're here. Go home. Sleep. Let the doctor handle it." The doctor who wanted Ruth blind. The doctor who was conspiring with the judge to steal Eli's land. Damn it! Hattie grabbed Jonah's bridle and led him off the trail, through scrub brush and loose rock, around the washout. She slipped twice. The second time, she went down hard on her knee and felt skin tear through her dress. She got up. She kept going. By the time the sky turned gray, she could see the ranch below. Big cabin, stone chimney trailing smoke, corrals full of dark shapes, cattle, hundreds of them, shifting and lowing in the morning cold. Hattie slid off Jonah. Her legs buckled. She grabbed the fence post and held on until her knees stopped shaking. She tied the mule. She pulled the saddlebag over her shoulder. She walked to the front door. Her hand hovered over the wood. Inside, a dog was barking. She could smell coffee. She could smell something else underneath. Something sweet and wrong. Infection. She knocked 3 times, hard. Boots on floorboards, heavy, fast. The door swung open. Elijah Crenshaw filled the frame like a wall. Shirtless. Coffee in one hand. Scar pulling his face into a permanent snarl. His blue eyes hit her like winter. He looked at her. All of her. The muddy boots. The coat straining at the buttons. The sweat-soaked hair plastered to her round face. The saddlebag clutched against her chest like a shield. "Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying." "I ain't selling. I'm here for your mother." His eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent me." "You rode up here alone?" "I did." "On that." He looked at Jonah, tied to his fence, looking half dead. He looked back at her. "In the dark?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because your mother is going blind, and I can stop it." Eli laughed. One short, hard bark. "Doc Whitfield says the nerve is dying. Nothing to be done." "Doc Whitfield is a liar and a thief, and if you let him near your mother again, you'll lose more than her eyes." That stopped the laughter dead. Eli's hand tightened on the doorframe until his knuckles went white. "What did you just say?" "I said your doctor is a liar. I heard him. 3 days ago, outside the courthouse. Him and Judge Tate. They want your mother blind, Eli. They want you broken so you'll sell the copper land cheap before the railroad comes through." Eli's face didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. A crack forming in stone. "You're lying." "I scrub floors for a living, Mr. Crenshaw. I don't have the imagination to lie." "And you think you can fix what a trained doctor can't? You, the laundry girl." "My mother was Cherokee. She healed things white doctors can't even name. She taught me everything before she died. I have her journal. I have her medicine. I can make a compress that will draw the infection out and save the nerve before the damage is permanent." "Cherokee hoodoo." Eli shook his head. "My mother ain't your experiment." "Your mother is going blind." "I know that!" The words exploded out of him, raw, ragged, ripped from somewhere deep. For 1 second, the mask dropped. Hattie saw it. The boy underneath the scar. The son watching his mother disappear into darkness, terrified and helpless and furious about both. Then the mask came back. Hard. Cold. Final. "Go home, girl. You're wasting my time." He closed the door. Not a slam. Worse, a slow, deliberate push, the oak swinging shut with the quiet finality of a coffin lid. Habby stood on the porch. The morning air bit her cheeks. Her knee was bleeding through her dress. Her hands were numb. She didn't move. 1 minute. 2. 3. She stood there, staring at the closed door, the saddlebag cutting into her shoulder. Then, from inside the cabin, Ruth screamed. Not a scream of pain, a scream of terror. The sound of a woman reaching for something in the dark and finding nothing. The sound of a world going black. "Eli! Eli, I can't see the window! The light! Eli, the light is gone! It was there this morning, and now it's gone! Eli, help me! Help me!" Habby heard boots scrambling inside, heard Eli's voice cracking. "Ma, I'm here! I'm right here! Don't touch the bandages, Ma!" "I can't see your face, Eli! I can't see my son's face!" Hattie pressed her hand flat against the door. She felt the wood vibrate with Ruth's sobs. 10 seconds passed. The door opened. Eli stood there. His eyes were red. His jaw was clenched so tight the scar looked like it might split open. His chest was heaving. He didn't speak. He stepped aside. Hattie walked in. The cabin was dark and hot, fire roaring. A massive wolfhound lifted its head from the hearth, sniffed her, and lay back down. The air was thick with wood smoke, and underneath it, that sweet, cloying, wrong smell. Hattie didn't stop. She walked straight past Eli, past the kitchen table, past the rifle hanging over the mantel, to the back room. Ruth Crenshaw sat in a rocking chair by the window. Her hands were tearing at the bandages on her eyes, her fingers bloody from scratching at the cloth. She was rocking violently, the chair slamming against the floor with each pass. "Mrs. Crenshaw," Hattie knelt. She caught Ruth's hands and held them. "Mrs. Crenshaw, it's Hattie. Hattie Mae Prescott. Ayanna's girl." Ruth froze. Her torn fingers gripped Hattie's wrists. "Hattie?" The rocking stopped. "Little Hattie." "I'm not little anymore, ma'am." Ruth's bloody fingers found Hattie's face. They moved over her cheeks, her jaw, her forehead, mapping her. "No, you're not." Ruth's voice broke. "You're a mountain." Hattie's throat closed. She swallowed hard. "I brought medicine, Mrs. Crenshaw, my mother's medicine. I can help your eyes, but I need you to trust me. Your mother." Ruth's fingers stopped on Hattie's cheek. "Ayanna. She could heal anything. The town let her die, and I should have fought harder for her. I'm sorry, Hattie. I'm so sorry. That's not why I'm here." "Then why?" "Because you wiped the mud off a little girl's face when nobody else would stop their wagon. Because you told her she was a mountain. And mountains don't forget." Ruth's hand slid down to Hattie's and held it. Tight. The grip of a woman reaching for solid ground in a world gone dark. "Eli!" Ruth called out. Her voice had changed. The terror was gone. In its place was the iron tone of a woman who had run a frontier schoolroom for 30 years. "Eli, come here." He was already in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. "This girl's mother saved more lives than every doctor in Texas combined. If Hattie says she can help me, then she can help me. You will not interfere. You will do what she tells you. Are we clear?" "Ma, are we clear?" Elijah James Crenshaw. The full name. 3 names. The weapon of every mother since the beginning of time. Eli uncrossed his arms. He looked at Hattie, kneeling on the floor in her muddy coat, holding his mother's bloody hands. He looked at the saddlebag full of jars and herbs and desperate hope. "What do you need?" he asked. The fight was gone from his voice. Hattie didn't waste the opening. "Hot water, clean cloth, every candle you own. And I need you to hold her when it starts to burn, because it will burn, and she'll fight you." "I can take it," Ruth said. "I know you can, ma'am, but your son needs something to do with his hands besides make fists." The ghost of a smile crossed Ruth's face. Eli stared at Hattie for a long beat, something shifting behind those blue eyes that he couldn't name and didn't try to. Then he moved. He filled the kettle. He tore a cotton shirt into strips. He gathered every candle in the cabin and lit them until the back room glowed like a chapel. Hattie opened the saddlebag. She laid out the golden seal paste, the white oak bark, the honey, the linen. Her hands were steady. The fear was gone. This was the work her mother had built her for. She unwrapped Ruth's bandages slowly. The eyes beneath were swollen shut, the lids crusted and angry red, the skin around them hot enough to feel from inches away. But when Hattie pressed gently near the bridge of Ruth's nose, the old woman flinched. Hattie almost cried with relief. The nerve was alive. Damaged, screaming, but alive. "I can save your eyes, Mrs. Crenshaw." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Then do it, mountain girl. And call me Ruth." Hattie looked at Eli. He was standing behind her, arms full of clean cloth, candlelight carving deep shadows under his cheekbones. His eyes were locked on his mother's ruined face, and in them Hattie saw something she recognized. The same helpless rage she'd felt kneeling in the mud behind the livery stable at 12 years old, waiting for someone to stop the stones. "Hold her shoulders," Hattie said. "Don't let go, no matter what she says." Eli knelt on the other side of the chair. He put his massive hands on Ruth's shoulders. His fingers were trembling. "I'm right here, Ma," he whispered. Hattie dipped the first compress into the warm, golden seal mixture. The sharp, earthy smell filled the room. She brought it to Ruth's eyes. "This is going to burn, Ruth. Breathe through it. Your body is going to fight the medicine before it accepts it. That's how you know it's working." "Do it," Ruth said. Hattie pressed the compress against Ruth's swollen eyes. For 2 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Ruth Crenshaw screamed. Ruth's scream tore through the cabin like a living thing. It hit the walls, bounced off the timber, and came back sharper. Her back arched out of the rocking chair so hard Eli nearly lost his grip. "Hold her," Hattie commanded. "I'm trying. Ma, stop! Ma!" Ruth's hands shot up, clawing at the compress, clawing at her own face. Eli caught her wrists and pinned them against the chair arms. His knuckles were white, his teeth were bared. He looked like a man holding down a wildcat. "Take it off!" Eli roared. "You're killing her!" "I'm saving her. Hold her, Eli." "She can't take it." "She can. She's stronger than both of us, and you know it." Ruth screamed again, a raw, guttural sound that didn't belong to a 63-year-old schoolteacher. It belonged to something primal, something animal, something being burned alive from the inside. Hattie didn't flinch. She pressed the compress tighter, her thick fingers steady against Ruth's temples. The golden seal paste was doing its work, pulling the infection to the surface, forcing the poison out through the swollen tissue. The burn meant the nerves were alive. The burn meant there was still something to save. "Ruth," Hattie leaned close, her mouth near the old woman's ear. "Ruth, listen to me. This is the fire before the healing. Your body is fighting. Let it fight. Don't you quit on me. Don't you dare quit." Ruth's screaming dropped to a moan. Her fingers uncurled from Eli's grip. Her chest heaved like a bellows, but the thrashing slowed. Tears streamed from beneath the compress, cutting clear tracks through the dried discharge on her cheeks. "Burns," Ruth gasped. "Lord God, it burns!" "I know," Hattie's voice cracked for the first time. "I know it does." "Is it working?" Hattie looked at the compress. The white linen was already turning yellow-green where it touched Ruth's skin. The infection being drawn out, pulled from the tissue like venom from a snake bite. "It's working, Ruth." Ruth's hand found Hattie's wrist and gripped it, not fighting now, holding on. "Don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere." Eli watched from the other side of the chair. His hands were still on his mother's shoulders, but the pressure had eased. He stared at Hattie, at the way she held the compress, firm but gentle, at the way she talked his mother down from agony with nothing but her voice, at the calm in her hands while his own were shaking like leaves. He didn't say anything. He didn't trust his voice. The first hour was the worst. Ruth cycled between screaming and whimpering, her body lurching against the chair, her fingers digging into Hattie's arm hard enough to leave bruises. Hattie changed the compress 3 times, each application drawing out more of the greenish-yellow poison. The smell was foul, sharp and sweet and wrong, but Hattie breathed through her mouth and kept working. Eli held his mother. That was all he could do. He held her shoulders when she thrashed. He held her hand when she reached for him. He held his own breath when the screaming got so bad he wanted to tear the compress off himself and throw Hattie out the door. But he didn't, because every time he looked at Hattie's face, he saw something that anchored him. Not fear, not doubt. Certainty. This woman knew what she was doing. She knew it the way he knew cattle, the way he knew the mountain, the way he knew the sound of his brothers' voices before the mind took them. By the second hour, Ruth stopped screaming. Her breathing evened out. Her grip on Hattie's arm loosened. She slipped into a heavy, exhausted sleep, her chin dropping to her chest, her body finally surrendering to the medicine. Hattie sat back on her heels. Her arms were trembling. Her dress was soaked with sweat. The golden seal paste was smeared up to her elbows, and her hair had fallen completely out of its tie, hanging in damp ropes around her flushed face. "Is she—" Eli started. "Sleeping. The body heals fastest when it sleeps. The compress needs to stay on for another hour, then I change it. And then? Then we do it again, 3 times a day for 3 days." Eli stared at his mother's face. Beneath the compress, the swelling along her cheekbones had already begun to soften. He reached out and touched her forehead, still warm, but not the raging heat of an hour ago. He looked at Hattie. She was trying to stand up and failing. Her legs had gone numb from kneeling. Eli didn't think about it. He reached down, hooked his hands under her arms, and lifted her to her feet like she weighed nothing. Hattie gasped, her hands landing on his chest for balance. She felt the wall of muscle beneath his shirt, the heat of him, and pulled her hands back like she'd touched a hot stove. "Sorry. Sit down before you fall down," Eli said. He dragged the wooden stool from the corner and planted it behind her. "Sit." She sat. He went to the kitchen. She heard him banging around, kettle, cups, something sizzling. He came back with coffee and a plate of cold cornbread with bacon. "Eat." "I'm fine." "You rode 4 hours in the dark, climbed my mountain, fought my mother's infection for 2 hours, and you're shaking so hard you can't hold your own hand still. Eat the food, Hattie." It was the first time he'd used her name. Hattie took the plate. The cornbread was dry, and the bacon was burnt, but she ate every crumb. The coffee was black and bitter and perfect. She wrapped both hands around the tin cup and let the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. Eli pulled a chair across from her. He sat down, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. Quiet filled the room. Not awkward quiet, the heavy, breathing quiet of 2 people who had just survived something together and didn't have words for it yet. Eli broke first. "What you said on the porch, about Whitfield and my mother, about the judge. Every word was true." "I know." He said it flat. No surprise, no outrage. Like a man who had suspected the worst and just had it confirmed. "I've known Tate wanted the copper land for years. I just didn't think he'd, through my mother. I didn't think he'd go through her. Men like Tate don't go through people, Eli. They go around them. They wait until you're weak, and then they take what they want and make it look like your idea." Eli looked up. His blue eyes were bloodshot. "You talk like you've dealt with men like that before." "I've been invisible my whole life, Mr. Crenshaw. When people think you're furniture, they say things in front of you they'd never say to a person. I've heard more secrets scrubbing floors than most spies hear in a lifetime." A sound escaped Eli. Not quite a laugh, not quite a grunt. Something in between that said he believed her. "What exactly did you hear?" Hattie told him. Everything. The courthouse steps, Whitfield's cigar, Tate's casual voice, the railroad surveyors coming in spring, the plan to break Eli through Ruth's blindness, to force a sale of the copper land below value. Make his options worse, Hattie repeated. Those were Whitfield's exact words. He didn't say what that meant, but I don't think he was talking about medicine. Eli was very still, the kind of still that comes before violence. His hands, resting on his knees, had curled into fists so tight the tendons stood out like cables. I'll kill him, Eli said quietly. Not a threat, a statement of fact, like saying the sun would rise. No, you won't. Give me one reason. Because your mother needs you alive and out of prison. And because killing a man is easy. Proving he's a fraud in front of the whole town. That's justice. Eli looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the way he'd looked at her on the porch, measuring her size, cataloging her flaws. This was different. He was looking at her mind. You have a plan, he said. I have a beginning of one, but first I have to save your mother's eyes. That's the foundation. If Ruth can see, Whitfield's entire scheme collapses. He needs her blind. He needs you desperate. If I take that away from him, he's got nothing. And then? And then we make him show his hand in front of people who matter. The sheriff, the town council, people Tate can't buy. Tate can buy anyone. He can't buy me. I don't own anything worth selling. Eli stared at her for a long time. The fire popped. The wolfhound sighed in its sleep. Ruth's breathing was steady and deep. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, Eli said slowly, or the craziest. Probably both. My mother was Cherokee. My father was Irish. I come by it honest on both sides. That one got an actual sound from Eli, a short exhale through his nose that might have been the beginning of a laugh if he hadn't killed it. He stood up. He went to a chest in the corner and pulled out a wool blanket. He dropped it in her lap. The back room has a second cot. My brother's old. He stopped. His jaw worked. It's empty. You can sleep there between treatments. Thank you. Don't thank me. You're doing me a favor. I don't forget favors. He walked to the door of Ruth's room and stood there, watching his mother sleep. His hand rested on the doorframe, his fingers tracing the wood the way a man touches something he's afraid of losing. Eli, he turned. She's going to see your face again. I promise you that. Something moved in his expression. Something fast and raw that he shut down before it could reach the surface. He nodded once and walked away. Hattie pulled the blanket around her shoulders. The wool smelled like cedar and tobacco, and the cabin and the man who lived in it. She closed her eyes and was asleep in 30 seconds. She woke to screaming. Not Ruth. A horse. Outside. Screaming the way horses scream when something is wrong. A high, shrill sound that brought Hattie off the cot and onto her feet before her eyes were open. Boots pounding. Eli's voice. Stay inside! The front door slammed. The wolfhound was on its feet, hackles raised, a low growl vibrating in its chest. Through the window, Hattie could see Eli running toward the corral, rifle in hand. 2 of his cattle were down, lying on their sides in the dirt, legs stiff, mouths foaming. Dead. Eli knelt beside the first one. He grabbed its jaw, pried the mouth open, and smelled. His face went dark. Hattie came out onto the porch. I told you to stay inside. What happened? Poisoned. Eli stood up. He looked at the water trough. He walked to it, dipped his hand, and brought it to his nose. His expression didn't change, but his voice went cold enough to freeze the air between them. Someone put something in the water. Bitter almonds. Arsenic, maybe. 2 head dead. Could have been the whole herd. When? Last night. Had to be. I watered them at sundown, and they were fine. He looked toward the trail that led down to Ridgewater. Someone came up here while I was inside with Ma. While I was here. While you were saving her eyes, someone was poisoning my cattle. Eli's knuckles went white around the rifle stock. Tate, Whitfield, one of them, or someone they paid. Making your options worse, Hattie said quietly. Eli turned to her. The morning sun hit the scar on his face and turned it silver. You still think killing him is wrong? I think killing him is exactly what he wants you to do. You shoot Tate or Whitfield, the sheriff locks you up. Nobody's left to fight for Ruth, and the copperland goes to auction. Tate wins. Then what do I do? You let me finish what I started. 3 days. I save Ruth's eyes. We document everything. The poisoned cattle, the trough, Whitfield's treatment that wasn't treatment. And then we go to town and we burn him down in front of everyone. Eli studied her face. She was standing on his porch in a patched wool coat, her hair wild, her dress stained with golden seal paste, and she was talking about taking down the most powerful man in the county like she was planning a Sunday dinner. Why? Eli asked. Why what? Why do you care about any of this? The land isn't yours, the cattle aren't yours. My mother, you barely know her. I told you why. She wiped the mud off my face. That was 16 years ago. Nobody rides up a mountain in the dark for a handkerchief and a kind word. Not even you. Hattie was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the dead cattle, at the hills rolling gold and brown to the horizon, at the thread of road far below that led back to Ridgewater, and the lean-to, and the lye soap, and the women whispering behind their hands. You want the truth? I always want the truth. I'm tired, Hattie said. The word came out heavier than she expected. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of scrubbing floors for people who don't see me. I'm tired of hearing men like Tate and Whitfield destroy lives and knowing I could stop it and doing nothing because nobody would listen to the fat girl. She turned to face him. Your mother gave me one moment of being seen. One moment in 28 years. And I thought, if I can save her, maybe that's my purpose. Maybe all these years of being nobody were just preparation for the one time it mattered. Eli didn't move. The wind pushed his dark hair across the scar, and he let it. You're not nobody, Hattie. You thought I was this morning. This morning I was a fool. I'm a fast learner. He shifted the rifle to his other hand. 3 days. You save her eyes. I protect the ranch. Then we go to town together. Together? Together. Whatever Tate throws at us, he throws at both of us. That's the deal. He held out his hand. Hattie looked at it. The hand of the man who had closed a door in her face 4 hours ago. Scarred, calloused, massive, steady. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, rough and warm, and he shook once. Firm. Final. Now get inside, Eli said, releasing her hand. My mother's compress needs changing, and I need to drag 2 dead cows out of my corral before they poison the rest. Eli. What? Check the well, too. If they hit the trough, they might have hit the well. He paused. Something crossed his face. Not gratitude, not surprise. Recognition. The look of a man realizing the person standing in front of him was thinking 3 steps ahead. I'll check the well, he said. Abby went inside. She washed her hands. She heated water. She mixed a fresh batch of compress. She walked into Ruth's room and found the old woman awake, her bandaged face turned toward the window. Ruth, how are you feeling? Like somebody set my eyes on fire and then put them out with a hammer. Ruth's voice was dry, cracked, and completely herself. So I reckon it's working. Hattie laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, the kind she hadn't heard come out of her own mouth in years. She knelt beside the chair and began unwrapping the old compress. "The swelling is down," Hattie said, examining Ruth's eyes carefully. The angry red had faded to a deep pink. The discharge was thinner, clearer. "We're ahead of schedule." "Hattie." "Ma'am?" "I heard the horse screaming this morning, and I heard you talking to my son on the porch. These walls are thin." Hattie's hands stilled on the linen. "You're in danger being here," Ruth said. "Tate doesn't play games. If he knows you're helping me, he'll come for you." "Let him come." "You sound like Eli." "I'll take that as a compliment." "Take it as a warning." Ruth's voice dropped. "I lost 2 sons in that mine, Hattie. The explosion wasn't an accident. The timbers were rotten. The mine owner knew. He let my boys go down there anyway because replacing timbers cost money and replacing workers cost nothing." Hattie's hands stopped moving. "The mine owner sold his claim to Cornelius Tate 6 months later," Ruth continued. "The same copperland Tate is trying to buy from Eli now. The same land my boys died under." "Eli knows this?" "Eli knows his brothers died. He doesn't know Tate profited from it. I never told him because I knew what he'd do. He'd kill him. He'd kill him, and they'd hang him, and I'd bury my last son. So I kept quiet. For 12 years I kept quiet, and it ate me alive." Hattie sat back. The compress cooled in her hands. "Ruth, if we go to town with this, the poison cattle, the conspiracy against your eyes, and the truth about the mine, Tate is finished, not just embarrassed." Ruth was silent for a long time. Her ruined eyes stared at nothing beneath the bandages. Her lips moved without sound, and Hattie understood. She was praying. "Promise me something, Hattie Mae. Anything. Promise me you'll keep him from doing something he can't take back. He's got his father's temper and his mother's stubbornness, and that is a combination that gets men killed." Hattie placed the fresh compress gently against Ruth's eyes. The old woman hissed at the sting, but didn't scream this time. Her hand found Hattie's and held on. "I promise, Ruth." "Good." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Now fix my eyes, mountain girl. I want to see the look on Cornelius Tate's face when his whole world comes crashing down." The second compress went on at noon. Ruth didn't scream this time. She gripped the arms of the rocking chair until her knuckles went white, sucked air through her teeth, and whispered the Lord's Prayer twice through. When Hattie peeled it away 20 minutes later, the discharge on the linen was lighter, thinner. The angry red around Ruth's eyes had softened to a bruised pink. "Better?" Hattie asked. "Worse," Ruth said. "I can feel the light now. It hurts." Hattie's heart jumped. "You can feel it?" "Like somebody holding a candle behind a curtain. It's there. I can't see it yet, but I know it's there." Hattie pressed her palm against her own mouth to keep the sound inside. She didn't want Ruth to hear her cry. Not now. Not when they were winning. "That's the nerve waking up," Hattie said, keeping her voice steady. "The infection was pressing on it. We're taking the pressure off. Tomorrow, if God is willing, you'll see shapes." "And the day after?" "Faces." Ruth reached out and found Hattie's cheek. Her fingertips were rough. A teacher's hands. A mother's hands. And she cupped Hattie's face like she was memorizing it by touch, before she could memorize it by sight. "I want your face to be the first thing I see, Hattie Mae." "It might scare you." "Girl, I birthed Elijah Crenshaw. Nothing scares me anymore." Outside, Eli was dragging the second dead cow behind the barn with a chain and his mare. Hattie heard the chain clanking. heard Eli grunting with effort, heard him stop and pour water over the trough for the third time, scrubbing it with sand and lye. He checked the well. It was clean. Whoever poisoned the cattle had only hit the trough, a warning shot, not a kill stroke. That scared Hattie more than a kill stroke would have. A kill stroke meant desperation. A warning meant patience. It meant Tate was playing a longer game. Eli came in at dusk. He dropped into the chair by the fire without washing up, his shirt dark with sweat, his hands black with dirt. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Both cows buried," he said. "Trough is clean. I moved the herd to the south pasture and blocked the creek access so nobody can get to the water without crossing open ground." Good. It's not good. 2 head of cattle is a message. 10 head would have been an attack. He's telling me he can reach me up here whenever he wants. He's trying to make you react. Don't. I'm not going to sit here and let a man poison my herd while you what? Ride down to town and put a bullet in him? That's what he wants, Eli. That's the whole point. Eli's jaw worked. He stared at the fire. His hands were on his knees, opening and closing, and Hattie could see the war inside him. The part that wanted to burn Ridgewater to the ground, fighting the part that knew she was right. 3 days, Hattie said. You gave me 3 days. It's been 1. Give me 2 more. And if he comes up here before then we deal with it. Together. That was the deal. Eli looked at her. The firelight caught the scar and turned half his face into shadow. You keep saying that word. Together. Like it means something. It means you're not alone anymore, whether you like it or not. He held her gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he stood up, walked to the basin, and started washing his hands. I'm going to sleep in the barn tonight. I can see the trail from the hayloft. If anyone comes up that road, I'll know. You need to sleep, Eli. I'll sleep when my mother can see, and Tate is in chains. Until then, I'll keep watch. He dried his hands and walked to the door. He stopped, with his fingers on the handle. Habby? What? The cornbread's in the box on the counter. Help yourself. And my mother likes her tea with honey before bed. If you could, I'll take care of her. He nodded. He opened the door. He stopped again. Thank you. The words sounded like they'd been dragged out of him with the same chain he'd used on the dead cattle. Rusty, reluctant, but real. You're welcome, Eli. The door closed. Hattie listened to his boots cross the porch, heard the barn door creak open and shut. She made Ruth's tea with honey. She changed the compress one more time. She read to Ruth from a Bible she found on the shelf, because Ruth asked her to, and because the sound of words in the quiet cabin kept the fear at bay. Ruth fell asleep holding Hattie's hand. Hattie sat by the fire and opened her mother's journal. She turned to the next day's treatment, the stronger formula, the one that would push deeper into the tissue and either save the nerve for good or tell her she'd been too late. Her mother's handwriting blurred as exhaustion pulled at her eyes. She closed the journal. She put another log on the fire. She lay down on the cot in the brothers' room and stared at the ceiling and thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. She was still thinking when sleep took her. Dawn came hard and fast. Hattie woke to the sound of Ruth calling her name and the smell of coffee already boiling. She stumbled into the kitchen and found Eli at the stove, frying eggs in a cast-iron pan. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were rimmed red, his jaw covered in dark stubble, his shirt wrinkled from the hayloft. "Anyone come up the trail?" Hattie asked. "No, quiet night." He slid 2 eggs onto a tin plate and set it on the table without looking at her. "Eat fast. She's been calling for you since before sunup." Hattie ate standing. She mixed the second-day formula, stronger golden seal, double the white oak bark, a new addition of ground comfrey root that her mother's journal said would accelerate nerve repair. Her hands moved with the certainty of ritual, measuring by feel, the way Ayana had taught her. She went to Ruth. The old woman was sitting up in the rocking chair, her face turned toward the window again. Always toward the window. "Good morning, Ruth." "Is it? I can't tell yet. But something's different." Ruth's voice had a new edge to it. Not pain, excitement. Terrified excitement. "Hattie, when I turn toward the window, I see something. Not shapes, not light, but something. Like the difference between dark and less dark." Hattie knelt and unwrapped the overnight compress. She examined Ruth's eyes carefully. The swelling was down by half. The crusting was almost gone. The lids were still pink and tender, but they weren't angry anymore. "This morning's treatment is going to be harder than yesterday," Hattie said. "The medicine is stronger. It goes deeper. Your body is going to fight it worse than before." "Worse than yesterday?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well," Ruth settled back in the chair and gripped the arms. "Let's get it over with." "Eli!" Hattie called. He appeared in the doorway immediately, like he'd been standing just outside it. Probably had been. "Hold her." He crossed the room in 2 strides and put his hands on Ruth's shoulders. His eyes met Hattie's over his mother's head. She saw the question in them. She nodded. She pressed the compress to Ruth's eyes. Ruth didn't scream. She roared. A deep, guttural sound that came from her chest and shook her whole body. Her hands shot up, and Eli caught them. She twisted in the chair, fighting the burn, fighting the medicine, fighting the pain that meant her eyes were still alive. "Hold on, Ma, hold on. She's got you. I've got you. Hold on." Eli's voice broke on the last word. Hattie heard it. Ruth heard it. And Ruth stopped fighting. Not because the pain stopped, but because her son needed her to be strong. And Ruth Crenshaw had spent her whole life being strong for her sons. "I'm all right, Eli." Ruth's voice shook, but didn't break. "I'm all right, baby." Hattie held the compress for 30 minutes this time, the longest yet. By the end, Ruth was trembling head to foot, her lips white, sweat soaking through her nightgown. But she hadn't screamed again. She'd whispered hymns under her breath, and when she ran out of hymns, she whispered her boys' names, the 2 who were gone, and the one who was holding her. When Hattie lifted the compress away, the linen was soaked through with fluid. Not the yellow-green of infection, but clear. Clean. The body flushing itself out. Purging the poison. "Ruth, open your eyes. Slowly." Ruth's lids fluttered. Trembled. Opened. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her pupils contracted against the light, reacting to light, and her mouth fell open. "Hattie, what do you see?" "Shapes." Tears rolled down Ruth's face. "I see shapes. I see... There's the window. I can see the window. It's bright." "Everything is blurry, but it's bright." Her hands shot out, grabbing the air. "Eli! Eli, where are you?" Eli moved into her line of sight. Ruth's ruined, beautiful, healing eyes locked onto a blur that was her son. "I see you," Ruth whispered. "I can't see your face yet, but I see you. You're there. You're standing right there." Eli made a sound, not a word, something before words. He dropped to his knees and buried his face in his mother's lap, and his shoulders shook. And Hattie turned away because some moments don't belong to anyone but blood. She walked to the kitchen. She gripped the edge of the counter and let her own tears come. Silently. One hand over her mouth. She cried for Ruth. She cried for Ayana, who should have been here to see her medicine work. She cried for the 12-year-old girl in the mud, who'd been told she was a mountain, and had spent 16 years trying to believe it. "You were right, Mama," Hattie whispered. "You were right about everything." She wiped her face. She washed her hands. She started mixing the afternoon compress. The rest of the day moved in a strange, suspended calm. Ruth slept between treatments. Eli rode the perimeter of the ranch twice, checking for signs of trespassers, testing the water, counting heads. He came back each time, grimmer. "Fence is cut on the north side," he reported at noon. "Somebody opened the wire. 10 head wandered into the canyon. Took me 2 hours to drive them back." "When was it cut?" "Recently. The wire is still shiny where the pliers bit. Probably last night." "While you were watching the trail?" "They came up the back way, through the canyon. There's a goat path I didn't think anyone knew about." "Tate knows." "Tate knows everything about this mountain. His surveyors have been crawling over it for years." Eli slammed his coffee cup on the table. "I can't watch every approach. I'm one man." "We need help." "From who? The sheriff? Ben Mackey owes Tate money."
"Whole town does."
"Not the whole town." Eli looked at her.
"Tom Pickett," Hattie said. "The farrier. He doesn't owe Tate anything. His wife, Nell, she buys herbs for me sometimes for her joints. They're good people. And there's the Reverend Morris. Tate tried to buy the church land last year, and Morris told him to go to hell from the pulpit."
"You want me to ask a horseshoer and a preacher to go to war with the most powerful man in the county?"
"I want you to ask honest men to stand up. That's all it takes. Tate's power comes from fear. The minute people stop being afraid of him, he's just a man in a nice suit."
Eli rubbed his face with both hands. "You've been thinking about this a lot."
"I've had years to think. Nobody talks to the fat girl, but the fat girl listens."
"Stop calling yourself that." The sharpness of his voice surprised them both. Hattie blinked. Eli looked away, jaw tight.
That's not what you are," he said roughly.
"You're the woman saving my mother's eyes. You're the woman who rode up a mountain in the dark. That's who you are. So stop calling yourself what they call you. They're wrong." Hattie stared at him. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He picked up his coffee cup, saw it was empty, and put it down again. "I'll ride to Pickett's place at sundown," Eli said. "I'll be back by midnight. Can you keep watch while I'm gone?"
"Can I shoot that rifle over the mantel?"
"Can you?"
"My father was a blacksmith, not a gentleman. He taught me to shoot before he taught me to read."
"Then yes, you can shoot the rifle." He paused at the door. "Don't open it for anyone. Anyone except me. If someone comes up that trail and it's not me, you put a round through the door and ask questions later."
"Eli."
"What?"
"Be careful."
He looked back at her. In the afternoon light, with his dark hair falling over the scar and his blue eyes holding something he hadn't learned to name yet, he almost looked gentle. "I'll be careful." The door closed. Hattie took the rifle down from the mantel. She checked the chamber. Full. She set it against the wall by Ruth's store and went in to start the afternoon compress. "He's gone?" Ruth asked. "To get help." "He trusts you. He trusts the situation."
"No, Hattie, he trusts you. My son doesn't trust anyone."
Ruth's healing eyes, still blurry, turned toward Hattie's shape.
"You walked right through it."
"I didn't do anything."
"You showed up. For most people, that's nothing. For Eli, that's everything. Nobody has ever shown up for him, not once."
Hattie busied herself with the compress. "I showed up for you, Ruth, not for him."
"Mm-hmm,"
Ruth smiled. The knowing, infuriating smile of a mother who sees everything, especially the things her children can't see themselves. "That's what you think." The afternoon compress went smoother. Ruth winced, but didn't roar. Her vision was strengthening by the hour. She could count the candles in the room. She could see the shape of the wolfhound sleeping by the fire. She couldn't read yet, couldn't make out features, but the darkness was retreating. Night fell. Hattie lit every lamp in the cabin. She fed Ruth soup and cornbread. She checked the windows. She sat in Eli's chair by the fire with the rifle across her knees and waited. An hour passed. 2. The wolfhound's ears perked up once, and Hattie's finger went to the trigger. But it was just a coyote calling from the canyon. The sound was lonely and old, and it made the cabin feel very small against the night. 3 hours. Hattie's eyes were heavy. She pinched her arm to stay awake. Then the wolfhound stood up. Not a lazy stretch, a snap to its feet, every muscle rigid, ears flat, a growl starting deep in its chest. Hattie stood. She cocked the rifle. Footsteps on the porch. Not Eli's boots. These were lighter, quicker. More than one person. A knock. "Miss Prescott?" A man's voice. Smooth. Educated. Wrong. "Miss Prescott, it's Dr. Whitfield. I understand you're caring for Mrs. Crenshaw? I need to examine my patient." Hattie's blood went cold. "Hattie?" Ruth called from the back room, her voice tight with fear. "Hattie, don't open that door." Another voice, deeper, harder. "Miss Prescott, this is Deputy Barnes. The doctor has a legal right to examine his patient. Open the door, or I'll open it for you." Hattie's hands were slick on the rifle stock. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Eli was gone. She was alone on a mountain with a healing woman and a loaded gun, and the wolves were at the door. She planted her feet. She raised the rifle. "Dr. Whitfield," Hattie called out, her voice carrying through the oak. "Mrs. Crenshaw is no longer your patient. She's under my care, and she's recovering. You are not welcome here." "Miss Prescott, be reasonable. You have no medical credentials. If that woman goes blind under your care, you'll be charged with criminal negligence. Open the door." "That woman is getting her sight back, doctor. Something you told her son was impossible. Now why would a trained physician lie about a thing like that?" Silence on the other side of the door. A long, breathing silence. Then Whitfield's voice again, lower now, the smoothness cracking. "I'm going to give you to the count of 10, Miss Prescott. Then the deputy is going to break down this door." Hattie pulled the rifle tight against her shoulder. The wolfhound snarled, its lips peeled back over teeth that could crush bone. "You can count to 1,000, Dr. Whitfield. This door stays shut. And if your deputy puts a boot on that wood, I will put a bullet through it and through whatever's standing behind it. I am Ayanna Prescott's daughter. I don't bluff, and I don't miss." The silence stretched. Hattie could hear her own pulse in her ears. She could hear Ruth praying in the back room. She could hear the deputy shifting his weight on the creaking porch boards. Then hooves, coming fast up the trail. More than one horse. The front door shuddered as the men on the porch spun toward the sound. Hattie heard Whitfield swear under his breath. Heard the deputy's gun clear its holster. "That's far enough," the deputy shouted into the darkness. Eli's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Barnes, you've got 3 seconds to holster that weapon before I decide you're trespassing on my land with hostile intent, which in the state of Texas gives me every legal right to shoot you where you stand." "Crenshaw, the doctor has a court order." "I don't see a judge. I see a crooked doctor and a bought deputy standing on my porch in the middle of the night trying to get into my house while I'm away. That's not a court order, Barnes. That's a home invasion." A second voice, older and rougher. "And I'll testify to that in any court in the territory. Tom Pickett, for the record. I brought witnesses." A third voice, calm and measured. "Reverend Daniel Morris, I see everything that's happening here, gentlemen. God sees it too. But I find earthly witnesses more useful in a courtroom. Hattie lowered the rifle. Her arms were shaking so badly she had to lean it against the wall. She pressed her forehead against the door and breathed. On the other side, she heard Whitfield's voice, stripped of its smoothness, reduced to something small and vicious. "This isn't over, Crenshaw." "No," Eli said. "It isn't. But the next chapter happens in town, in daylight, in front of everyone. Now get off my mountain before I let the dog out." Boots on the porch. Fast. The deputy and Whitfield retreating down the steps, mounting horses, riding hard into the dark. The sound of hooves fading into the canyon. Then Eli's boots. Slow. Heavy. Crossing the porch. 3 knocks.
"It's me, Hattie. Open up."
She opened the door. Eli stood there with Tom Pickett and Reverend Morris behind him. All 3 men windburned and grim. Eli looked at her face, at the tear tracks and the white-knuckled grip on the door frame, and the rifle leaning against the wall. And something in his expression shifted like tectonic plates moving deep underground. "You all right?"
"I'm all right."
You pointed a rifle at a deputy.
"I pointed a rifle at a door. The deputy happened to be behind it."
Eli stared at her. Then he laughed. A real laugh, deep and rough and broken at the edges. The laugh of a man who hadn't laughed in 12 years and had forgotten what it felt like. Pickett and Morris exchanged a glance behind him. The kind of glance that said more than words. "Mrs. Prescott," Reverend Morris said, tipping his hat. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced."
"Miss,"
Hattie corrected.
"And it's Hattie."
"Miss Hattie, Tom and I would like to hear everything you know about Dr. Whitfield and Judge Tate, from the beginning." Hattie looked at Eli. He nodded. She stepped aside and let them in. She put the coffee on. She sat down at the table with 3 men who were looking at her the way no man in Ridgewater had ever looked at her before. Like she mattered. And she began to talk. Hattie talked until her voice went raw. She told them everything. The courthouse steps, Whitfield's cigar, Tate's casual voice planning Ruth's blindness like a business transaction, the poisoned cattle, the cut fence, the midnight visit. Pickett and Morris listened without interrupting, their faces going darker with every word. When she finished, the cabin was silent except for the fire and Ruth's steady breathing from the back room. Pickett spoke first. "I always knew Tate was crooked, but this, using a doctor to blind a woman so he can steal land, this is something else."
"This is murder by degrees," Morris said quietly.
"Not fast enough to call it killing, slow enough to call it fate."
"It gets worse,"
Hattie said. She looked at Eli. He was leaning against the mantel, arms crossed, his face unreadable.
"Ruth told me something yesterday about the mine explosion, the one that killed your brothers."
Eli's body went rigid, every muscle locked. "What about it?"
"The timbers were rotten. The mine owner knew they were rotten and sent your brothers down anyway. 6 months after the explosion, that owner sold the mineral rights to Cornelius Tate."
The silence that followed was the most dangerous sound Hattie had ever heard. It was the silence of a fuse burning.
"Eli,"
Hattie said carefully,
"your mother kept this from you for 12 years because she knew what you'd do."
She was right. Eli's voice was barely human, low, grinding, the sound of something breaking underground. "I'll kill him."
"No."
"He killed my brothers, Hattie."
"He killed your brothers, and if you kill him, you'll hang, and Ruth will be alone, and Tate's son or Tate's partners will take the Copperland anyway, and everything your brothers died on top of will belong to the man who put them there."
"She's right, son," Pickett said.
"Don't call me son.
I'll call you what I please, Elijah. I shoed your first horse when you were 14. I was at your brother's funeral. I watched you disappear up this mountain, and I didn't say a word because it wasn't my place. But it's my place now. Pickett leaned forward, his weathered face hard. You ride down there and put a bullet in Tate. The whole county says the ghost of Copper Hollow finally snapped. They'll call it proof you're the animal they always said you were. Tate wins from the grave. Or, Morris said, folding his hands on the table like a man about to deliver a sermon, we walk into town in broad daylight. We present the evidence. We let the people of Ridgewater see what's been done in their name with their silence. And we let the law do what the law is supposed to do. The law. Eli spat the word. Sheriff Mackey is Tate's man. Mackey is a coward, Morris said. There's a difference. A bought man fights for his master. A coward runs when the tide turns. We turn the tide. Mackey runs. How? A town meeting, Hattie said. All three men looked at her. This Sunday, after church, when everyone's together, we walk in, Ruth on her own 2 feet, eyes open, seeing, and we tell them everything, the conspiracy, the poisoning, the mine. Ruth can't walk into town by Sunday, Eli said. She can barely see shapes. She'll be ready. Hattie's voice carried a certainty she felt in her bones. Tomorrow is the 3rd day, the final treatment. If it works the way my mother's journal says it will, Ruth will have her sight back by Saturday night. Not perfect, but enough to walk, enough to look Cornelius Tate in the eye. Eli stared at her. And if it doesn't work? Then we go anyway. Ruth's improvement alone proves Whitfield lied. He said she'd be blind by Christmas. She's seeing shapes after 2 days. That's evidence. Morris nodded slowly. The girl's right. We don't need Ruth to have perfect vision. We need her to have better vision than Whitfield said was possible. That proves his diagnosis was false. From there, motive follows. I need more than motive, Eli said. I need proof Tate ordered the cattle poisoned. I need proof he bought Whitfield. I need something that ties him to my brothers. I can get it, Hattie said. Every eye in the room locked on her. Whitfield keeps records. Every doctor does. His office is behind the apothecary on 2nd Street. He logs every patient, every treatment, every payment. If Tate is paying him, it's in those books. And if he's been deliberately mistreating Ruth, prescribing medicine that makes the infection worse instead of better, that'll be in the records too. You want to break into the doctor's office, Eli said flatly. I want to walk in through the front door. I clean that office every other Wednesday. Mrs. Whitfield hired me 6 months ago to scrub the floors and empty the waste bins. She gave me a key. Pickett let out a low whistle. The Lord works in mysterious ways. The Lord didn't give me that key, Hattie said. Mrs. Whitfield gave me that key, because I'm the only woman in town cheap enough and invisible enough to scrub a doctor's floor for 15 cents. When? Eli asked. Tomorrow's Wednesday. I go in at dawn, before the office opens. I have 2 hours alone in there. I'll find the ledger, and I'll find whatever else there is to find. Not alone. Eli, if you walk into that office, every tongue in town will wag. Nobody notices the cleaning girl. That's the whole point. I don't like it. You don't have to like it. You have to trust me. The word hung between them. Trust. The thing Eli Crenshaw didn't do. The thing he'd stopped doing the day the mine swallowed his brothers. I trust you, Eli said, quietly, like it cost him something. Pickett and Morris left before dawn. They would ride back to town separately, spread the word quietly about the Sunday meeting. Morris would announce it from the pulpit as a community gathering. Nothing about Tate, nothing about accusations. Just a town meeting. The trap would be set. Hattie slept 2 hours. She woke before the sun and mixed the final compress, the strongest formula, the one her mother's journal called the last fire. Double golden seal, triple comfrey, a drop of capsicum tincture that would burn like the devil's own breath, but force the blood vessels open, flooding the healing nerve with fresh blood. She carried it to Ruth's room. The old woman was already awake, sitting in the rocking chair, her face turned toward the window. The bandages were off. Ruth's eyes were open. "Hattie," Ruth's voice was trembling, "I can see the sunrise." Hattie knelt. She looked into Ruth's eyes. The swelling was nearly gone. The whites were still bloodshot, streaked with the aftermath of infection, but the pupils were clear, reactive, alive. "How many fingers?" Hattie held up 3. Ruth squinted. "3. And your hand is shaking." "You can see my hand shaking?" "I can see your hand. I can see your arm. I can see—" Ruth's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears. "I can see your face, Hattie Mae. It's blurry, like looking through water, but I can see you." Hattie pressed her forehead against Ruth's knee and let the sobs come. She couldn't hold them anymore. They came from someplace deep, someplace she'd bricked shut years ago, and they tore through her like the spring runoff tearing through a dry creek bed. Ruth's hand found Hattie's hair and stroked it. Now, mountains don't cry." "This one does." "Then I reckon you're not just a mountain. You're a mountain with a river running through it. That's the best kind. That's the kind that gives life." The final compress was agony. Ruth screamed once, a sharp, bitten-off cry that she swallowed before it could echo. Eli held her. Hattie held the compress. 30 minutes of fire and prayer. When Hattie lifted the linen away, the cloth was clean. No discharge. No infection. Just warm salt water from Ruth's own tears. "Open." Ruth opened her eyes. She blinked. She looked at Hattie. She looked at Eli. "Oh." Ruth pressed both hands to her mouth. "Oh, Eli, your face. I can see your face." Eli didn't speak. He couldn't. He dropped his head and Ruth pulled him close, her healing eyes streaming, her arms around the son she could finally see again. "Your scar doesn't make you ugly, baby," Ruth whispered, tracing the raised line with her finger. "It makes you alive. It means you survived." Eli's shoulders shook. Once. Twice. Then he pulled back, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and stood up. He looked at Hattie, and what she saw in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Hattie rode down the mountain at dawn on Jonah, leaving Eli and Pickett guarding Ruth. The trail was easier in daylight, but her heart was pounding harder than it had in the dark. She reached Ridgewater by mid-morning and went straight to the lean-to. She changed into her cleaning dress. She took Mrs. Whitfield's key from the nail behind her stove. She walked to Whitfield's office on 2nd Street. She opened the door. She got her bucket and mop from the closet and started scrubbing the floor, exactly as she did every other Wednesday. Except today, between passes of the mop, she opened the desk drawers. The ledger was in the bottom drawer, underneath a stack of medical journals. Hattie pulled it out and opened it to the most recent entries. Her eyes scanned the columns. Patient names, treatments, payments. There it was. Ruth Crenshaw. Weekly visits beginning 3 months ago. Treatment prescribed. Mercury chloride drops applied directly to the eyes. Hattie's hands went cold. Mercury chloride. Not a treatment for eye infection. A poison. Applied in small doses directly to the eyes, it would mimic the progression of natural blindness while slowly destroying the optic nerve. Whitfield hadn't been failing to treat Ruth He had been blinding her on purpose. She turned the page. Payments. A column marked CT appeared beside Ruth's name every week. CT. Cornelius Tate. $50 per visit. 3 months of visits. $750 to blind a school teacher. Hattie flipped further back. Her fingers were shaking so badly she nearly tore the page. She found another section. Land acquisitions. Notes in Whitfield's cramped handwriting. Crenshaw copper claim. Estimated value $40,000. CT purchase price, if distressed sale, $6,000. My share, 15%. Contingent on widow status or incapacitation of heir. Widow status. They weren't just planning to blind Ruth and break Eli. They were planning for Eli to die. The cattle poisoning wasn't a warning. It was a test run. Hattie closed the ledger. She tucked it inside her cleaning apron, flat against her stomach, where the bulk of her body hid it completely. She finished mopping the floor. She emptied the waste bins. She locked the door behind her and walked home. Nobody looked at her. Nobody ever looked at her. The invisible woman with the mop and the secret that would burn Ridgewater to the ground. She rode back up the mountain that afternoon. Eli met her at the gate. He saw her face, and his hand went to his hip where his gun sat. What happened? Inside, not out here. She put the ledger on the kitchen table. She opened it to Ruth's page. She showed him the mercury chloride. She showed him the payments. She showed him the land acquisition notes. Eli read in silence. His face didn't change. It went beyond change into something fixed and final. The way metal looks after it's been forged. All the softness burned out. Nothing left but edge. Widow status, Eli said. They were going to kill you, Eli. After Ruth went blind. Make it look like an accident, a fall, a stampede, another mine collapse. And the land goes to Tate for pennies. And Whitfield gets his 15% and moves to San Francisco, and nobody ever asks why the school teacher went blind and the cattleman died young. Eli closed the ledger. He pressed both palms flat on the table and leaned on them, his arms locked, his head down. He breathed like a man trying not to drown. Sunday, he said. Sunday. You'll be there. I'll be standing right next to you, not next to me. He looked up. His blue eyes were burning. In front of me. This is your fight, Hattie. You found the truth. You saved my mother. You stole the evidence. I swung the fists and guarded the gate, but you're the one who brought the fire. Eli, I mean it. Sunday, you stand up in front of that town and you show them who you are. Not the cleaning girl, not Buffalo Girl. The woman who took down a judge and a doctor with a mop bucket and a mule. Hattie looked at him across the table. The man who had slammed a door in her face 4 days ago. The man who had called her the laundry girl. The man who was now looking at her like she was the bravest person he'd ever met. Okay, Hattie said. Sunday. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ruth's vision sharpened hour by hour. By Friday evening, she could read the Bible in her lap. By Saturday morning, she could thread a needle. She wept each time she saw something new. The wolfhound's face, the color of the sunset. Eli's scar in clear, sharp detail. You're beautiful, Ruth told her son, touching his face. Don't you argue with me. You're beautiful because you're here. Pickett came Saturday night with news. Morris had announced the town meeting. Tate had heard about it and was furious. He'd tried to get the sheriff to shut it down, but Morris had framed it as a church matter, and Mackey didn't have jurisdiction over the house of God. Tate will be there, Pickett warned. He'll bring his people. Delia, Barnes, probably some ranch hands for muscle. Let him bring an army, Eli said. We have the truth. And we have something else, Hattie added. She held up the ledger. We have his handwriting, his payments, his plan in black ink. Let him try to explain $750 to a doctor who was supposed to be treating his patient, not poisoning her. Pickett grinned. Miss Hattie, remind me never to cross you. I clean floors for a living, Mr. Pickett. I've had years to practice being underestimated. That night, after Pickett left, and Ruth was sleeping, and the cabin was dark except for the fire, Eli found Hattie on the porch. She was sitting on the step, the blanket around her shoulders, looking at the stars. He sat down next to her, close, their shoulders almost touching. The night was cold, but neither of them moved. You scared? Eli asked. Terrified. Good. Me too. You don't look terrified. I don't look like anything. That's the scar's one advantage. Can't read a poker face that's already been burned off. Hattie laughed, softly. The sound surprised her. Hattie? When this is over, when Sunday is done and Tate is finished and things are settled. Yes? Eli stared at the darkness. His jaw worked. The words were fighting to get out, and he was fighting to let them. I want you to stay. Hattie's heart stopped. Stay where? Here, on the mountain, with us, with me. Eli, I'm not asking for hell. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm no good at this. I've never been good at this. I don't know the right words. You're doing fine. I'm doing terrible. What I'm trying to say is, he turned to face her. In the starlight, his scar was invisible, and his eyes were everything. 4 days ago, I was a dead man walking. I was up here alone, watching my mother go blind, waiting for the mountain to swallow me the way it swallowed my brothers. Then you showed up on a mule with a saddlebag full of Cherokee medicine, and you saved her. You saved me. And I... He stopped. He looked at his hands. I don't want to go back to the dark, Hattie. I spent 12 years in the dark. You're the first light that's come through that door since my brothers died. Hattie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. She let them fall. You don't know me, Eli. Not really. It's been 4 days. I know you ride through storms. I know you stand in front of guns. I know you cry when my mother can see and you think nobody's watching. I know you talk to your mule like he's a person, and he listens. I know you carry your dead mother's journal against your heart like it's a Bible. He reached over and took her hand, his fingers laced through hers. I know enough. People will talk. People already talk. Let them talk about something worth talking about. Eli, I'm not what men want. I'm not Delia Tate. I'm not small. I'm not pretty. You're everything. The word came out raw, stripped of armor. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for because I was too blind to see it. And I swear to God, Hattie Mae Prescott, if you say one more word against yourself, I will throw this whole speech away and just kiss you instead. Hattie opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I'm not done talking bad about myself. Eli kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was the kiss of a man who had been alone for 12 years, who had forgotten what warmth felt like, who had found it in the last place he ever expected to look. His hand came up to her face, his scarred palm against her wet cheek, and he kissed her like the world was ending and she was the only solid ground left. Hattie kissed him back. She grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him closer. And for one moment, On that dark porch, under a sky full of cold stars, they were just two broken people holding each other together. When they finally pulled apart, Eli pressed his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?"
That's a we survive Sunday first. Then it's a yes.
I can work with that. They sat on the porch until the cold drove them inside. They sat by the fire until the fire burned low. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was full. At dawn on Sunday, Hattie dressed in her cleanest dress. It was still patched, still strained at the buttons, but she scrubbed her face, braided her hair tight, and tucked her mother's journal into the saddlebag next to Whitfield's ledger. Ruth came out of the back room on her own 2 feet. Her eyes were clear. Not perfect. The edges were still soft, the distance still blurry. But she looked at Hattie and smiled.
I can see the braids in your hair, mountain girl. Then you can see everything that matters.
Eli hitched the wagon. He helped Ruth into the back, wrapped in blankets. Then he turned to Hattie. "You're not riding the mule."
Eli, we talked about this.
He picked her up, clean off the ground, one arm under her knees, one around her back, lifting her like she was made of air and setting her on the wagon bench beside him. Her protest died in her throat. "My woman rides beside me," Eli said, "not behind." He took the reins. The wagon rolled. Copper Hollow fell away behind them. Below, Ridgewater waited, and in it, every person who had ever called her invisible, every man who had ever looked through her, every voice that had ever whispered, "Buffalo Girl." Hattie touched the ledger in her saddlebag. She touched her mother's journal. She sat up straight. Let them look, she thought. Today, they'll see me. The wagon rolled into Ridgewater at 10 minutes past 11. Church had just let out. The streets were full. Every soul in town was walking toward the meeting hall next to the courthouse. And every soul in town stopped dead when they saw the Crenshaw wagon coming down Main Street. Eli drove with his jaw set and his eyes forward. Hattie sat beside him, the saddlebag in her lap, her knuckles white around the leather strap. Behind them, Ruth Crenshaw sat upright in the wagon bed, her eyes open, her gaze moving across the town she hadn't seen in months. The whispers started before the wagon reached the livery.
Is that Ruth Crenshaw?
Lord Almighty, her eyes are open.
Who's that sitting next to Eli? Is that Big Hattie?
Eli pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the meeting hall. He set the brake. He climbed down, walked around to Hattie's side, and held out his hand. Not rushed, not hidden, in front of everyone. Hattie took his hand and stepped down. Her boots hit the dirt, and 50 pairs of eyes hit her. She felt every single one. The weight of their stares pressed against her chest like a physical thing. Then Eli reached into the wagon and helped Ruth down. The old woman stood on her own feet, steady, blinking in the bright Texas sun. She looked at the crowd gathered on the boardwalk, and the crowd looked back at her, and the silence was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. "Mornin', neighbors," Ruth said. Her voice was clear and strong and carried the length of Main Street. "Lovely day, isn't it? I can see that now. In case you were wondering." The crowd erupted, a dozen voices at once. How? When? Who? But Eli was already moving, one hand on Hattie's back, guiding her toward the meeting hall doors. Pickett was waiting outside with Reverend Morris. Both men tipped their hats to Ruth. "Mrs. Crenshaw," Morris said, "welcome back to the land of the scene."
Reverend, I'd have been here sooner, but your roads are terrible.
They walked inside. The meeting hall was packed. Every bench was full. People stood along the walls. The air smelled of sweat and dust and the anxious electricity that comes when a whole town knows something is about to happen, but nobody knows what. At the front of the room, behind the speaker's table, sat Judge Cornelius Tate. He wore his finest black suit. His silver watch chain caught the light. His face was composed, controlled, the face of a man who owned this room and everyone in it. Beside him sat Delia, rigid and beautiful, her green eyes scanning the crowd. Behind them stood Deputy Barnes and two ranch hands built like brick walls. Dr. Whitfield sat in the first row. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His fingers drummed on his knee. His eyes kept darting to the door. When Eli walked in with Hattie and Ruth, Whitfield went pale. When Ruth looked directly at him with clear, seeing eyes, Whitfield went gray. Tate saw it. His composed face didn't crack, but his hand tightened on the watch chain. One small motion. Hattie caught it. Morris walked to the front of the room and raised his hands for silence. It took a full minute for the crowd to settle. Neighbors, thank you for coming. I called this meeting because there are matters affecting this community that can no longer be addressed in private. I'm going to ask Miss Hattie Mae Prescott to speak. A murmur rolled through the room.
Hattie Mae Prescott? The cleaning girl? The fat one from the blacksmith's lean-to.
This is a town meeting, not a circus, Tate said from his chair, his voice smooth and commanding. What business does a laundress have addressing the citizens of Ridgewater? The business of truth, Judge, Morris said, which I believe is still welcome in this hall. Hattie stood up. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body wanted to shrink, to disappear, to melt into the floor the way she'd melted into shadows her entire life. She looked at Eli. He nodded once. That was enough. She walked to the front of the room. She set the saddlebag on the speaker's table. She turned to face the town of Ridgewater. 50 faces. 60. More. Mrs. Gable from the boarding house. Abigail Fenton, who whispered about her by the fence. Mrs. Tully from the post office. The boys who'd thrown rocks at her when she was 12. Grown men now, sitting in the back row, looking uncomfortable. Hattie opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. Delia Tate smirked. Then Ruth's voice from the third row, quiet but clear. Go on, mountain girl. We're listening. Hattie breathed. She found her voice. 3 months ago, Ruth Crenshaw started losing her sight. Dr. Whitfield diagnosed a progressive nerve infection and told her son there was nothing to be done. He said she'd be blind by Christmas. She paused, looked at Whitfield. He was staring at the floor. 5 days ago, I rode up to Copper Hollow with medicine my mother taught me to make. Cherokee medicine. Root medicine. The kind most of you call hoodoo and witchery. I treated Ruth's eyes with golden seal compresses for 3 days. She turned to Ruth. Mrs. Crenshaw, will you please stand up? Ruth stood. She looked around the room, her eyes moving from face to face, seeing each one. I can see, Ruth said simply. I can see every one of you. The room stirred. Gasps. Whispers. A woman in the back started crying. That's impossible, Whitfield blurted from his seat. The nerve was dying. I examined her myself. No herbal remedy can reverse optic nerve damage. You're right, doctor, Hattie said. No herbal remedy can reverse optic nerve damage. But it can reverse optic nerve poisoning. The room went dead silent. Hattie opened the saddlebag. She pulled out Whitfield's ledger and laid it on the table. This is Dr. Whitfield's medical ledger. I obtained it from his office, where I have been employed as a cleaning woman for 6 months. I can't read Latin, and I can't read most medical terminology, but I can read numbers. And I can read names. She opened the ledger to Ruth's page. Ruth Crenshaw, weekly treatments beginning 3 months ago. The prescribed medicine, mercury chloride drops applied directly to the eyes. She looked up at the crowd. Mercury chloride is not a treatment for eye infection. It is a poison. In small repeated doses, applied to the eyes, it destroys the optic nerve. Dr. Whitfield was not treating Ruth Crenshaw. He was blinding her, on purpose, 1 drop at a time. The room exploded, shouting, gasps, chairs scraping. Whitfield shot to his feet. "That's a lie. That woman stole my property. She broke into my office and—" "I used the key your wife gave me, doctor. The one I use every other Wednesday to scrub your floors. The floors you walk on while you plan how to blind old women for money." "For money?" Whitfield's voice pitched high. "What money? This is absurd." Hattie turned the page. Payments logged under the initials CT. $50 per visit. 3 months. $750 total. CT. Cornelius Tate. Every head in the room turned to the judge. Tate didn't flinch. He was too practiced for that. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and smiled the patient smile of a man who had weathered worse accusations.
"Miss Prescott," Tate said, his voice oily and calm. "I don't know what fantasy you've constructed from a stolen ledger and a grudge, but I assure you, those initials could belong to anyone. Charles Tucker, Catherine Tillman. The alphabet has many combinations." "Then explain this," Hattie said. She turned to another page. Land acquisition notes. Whitfield's handwriting. Crenshaw copper claim. Estimated value $40,000. CT. Purchase price if distressed sale. $6,000. My share 15%. Contingent on widow status or incapacitation of heir. She looked directly at Tate. "Widow status, Judge. That means Eli has to die. Incapacitation of heir means he has to be locked up or broken. You weren't just stealing land. You were planning to destroy a family." The room erupted again, louder this time, angrier. Pickett was on his feet. 3 ranchers in the back were shouting. Mrs. Tully was pointing at Tate with a shaking finger. "Order!" Tate slammed his hand on the table. "This is hearsay from a disgruntled domestic. Sheriff Mackey, arrest this woman for theft and defamation." Sheriff Mackey stood by the wall. He looked at Tate. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the fury building in 50 faces. He didn't move. "Sheriff!" Tate's composure cracked. Just a hair. A vein pulsed in his temple. "There's more," Hattie said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was hers now. 2 nights ago, someone poisoned 2 of Eli's cattle by putting arsenic in his water trough. Someone cut his fence and scattered his herd. And that same night, Dr. Whitfield arrived at the Crenshaw cabin with Deputy Barnes, in the middle of the night, demanding access to Ruth. While Eli was away. She turned to Barnes. The deputy was pressed against the back wall, his face the color of old ash. "Deputy Barnes, who told you to ride to Copper Hollow that night?" Barnes opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His eyes went to Tate. "Don't you look at him," Eli said from the 3rd row, and his voice was a blade. "Look at her. She asked you a question." Barnes swallowed. "The judge, Judge Tate told me to escort Dr. Whitfield. He said it was a medical emergency." "A medical emergency," Hattie repeated. "At midnight. For a patient the doctor had already declared hopeless. With no witnesses and the ranch owner conveniently gone." The room was vibrating now. The energy had shifted from shock to something darker. Something that smelled like justice and tasted like rage. Tate stood up. The mask was slipping.
The smooth politician was crumbling, and underneath was something cornered and vicious. "This is a farce," Tate hissed. "You people are going to take the word of this woman over mine? Look at her. She's a cleaning girl. She scrubs floors. She's nobody." The word hit the air and hung there. Nobody. Hattie felt it land. She felt it the way she'd felt every rock, every whisper, every sideways glance for 28 years. She felt the 12-year-old girl inside her flinch. But the 12-year-old girl wasn't alone anymore. "She's not nobody." Ruth Crenshaw stood up in the third row. Her eyes, her healed, clear, seeing eyes, were fixed on Tate. "She's the woman who gave me back my sight when your doctor was stealing it. She's the woman who rode through the dark on a mule to save a stranger. She's the woman who stood in front of a loaded gun to protect me." Ruth walked forward, slow, steady. The crowd parted for her. "And she's not done, Cornelius." Ruth stopped in front of the speaker's table. She turned to the room. 12 years ago, my 2 youngest sons went down into the Copper Hollow mine. The timbers were rotten. The mine owner knew they were rotten. He sent my boys down anyway because fixing timbers cost money and boys were cheap. The mine collapsed. My sons died underground, in the dark. Her voice didn't break. It was iron, forged in 12 years of silence. 6 months after the explosion, the mine owner sold the mineral rights. The buyer was Cornelius Tate, the same man who has spent 3 months blinding me so he could steal the same land my sons died under. The room went so quiet, Hattie could hear the flag flapping on the pole outside the courthouse. "You profited from my boy's death," Ruth said, looking at Tate. "And then you tried to profit from my blindness. And when that wasn't enough, you were going to kill my last son and call it an accident." Tate's face was white, not politician white, caught white, cornered animal white. "Mackey!" Tate shouted. "Mackey, do something!" Sheriff Mackey looked at the judge. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the 60 faces staring at him, waiting to see which side of history he'd stand on. Mackey unholstered his gun. He walked to the front of the room. He stopped in front of Tate. "Cornelius Tate, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, assault by poison, and suspicion of negligent homicide in the deaths of Samuel and Thomas Crenshaw." "You can't do this!" Tate lunged for the door. 2 ranchers caught him. He thrashed. He screamed. He called them all fools and liars, and threatened to have every one of them ruined. Nobody listened. Barnes cuffed Whitfield without being asked. The doctor didn't resist. He slumped in the handcuffs like a puppet with its strings cut, mumbling about debts and pressure and how he never wanted anyone to die. Delia Tate stood frozen by her father's empty chair. Her perfect face was shattered. She looked at Hattie with an expression that was equal parts hatred and horror. "You," Delia whispered. "You did this." Hattie looked at her. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt tired. Bone deep, mountain deep tired. "No, Miss Tate. Your father did this. I just turned on the light." Eli was beside her then. She hadn't heard him move. He put his hand on her back, and the warmth of it spread through her like sunrise. "Let's go home, Hattie." They walked out of the meeting hall into the bright Texas sun. The crowd parted around them, and this time the whispers were different. Not cruel, not mocking, awestruck. "She saved Ruth's eyes. Did you hear? Cherokee medicine. Rode up the mountain alone in the dark. Stood in front of a gun. Big Hattie. Lord, I'll never call her that again." Pickett had the wagon ready. Morris was helping Ruth into the back. Eli lifted Hattie onto the bench and climbed up beside her. He took the reins. "Wait." Hattie put her hand on his arm. She turned and looked back at Ridgewater, at the town that had made her invisible for 28 years. At the boardwalk where she'd watched Eli reject every pretty woman. At the alley where she'd stood in the shadows with a basket of wet laundry and a heart full of secrets. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to the people, to the girl she'd been. The girl who made herself small so others wouldn't notice her. The girl who walked the back alleys. The girl who believed them when they said she was nobody. That girl was gone. "Ready?" Eli asked. "Ready." The wagon rolled north, toward the mountain, toward home. They were married on a Tuesday, in the meadow behind the cabin, with wildflowers blooming yellow and purple in the October sun. Reverend Morris performed the ceremony. Pickett gave Hattie away because she had no father, and Pickett had said, "I'd be honored, Miss Hattie, and if you tell anyone I cried, I'll deny it." Ruth stood in the front row, her eyes clear, her face wet with tears, watching every moment with the fierce attention of a woman who knew what it meant to almost lose the gift of sight. Hattie wore a blue dress, not silk, not satin, good sturdy cotton that Eli had ridden to the county seat to buy because Hattie refused to set foot in Mrs. Gable's store. It fit her perfectly, every curve, every line, exactly as she was. No corset, no cinching, no apology. Eli wore a clean white shirt and looked like he'd rather fight a bear than stand in front of people. But when Hattie walked toward him through the wildflowers, his scarred face broke open into something so raw and unguarded that Morris had to stop talking and let the man collect himself. "You look," Eli started. "Don't say beautiful. I'll cry." "Then I won't say it, but I'll think it every day for the rest of my life." Morris married them. Eli kissed her in front of God and the mountain and the wolfhound who had fallen asleep under the table. Ruth laughed and clapped and said it was about damn time. The seasons turned. Winter came hard to Copper Hollow, but the cabin was warm. Hattie planted an herb garden that grew wild and fierce through the spring, and the people of Ridgewater started making the long ride up the mountain, not to see Eli, but to see her. They came with sore joints and bad coughs and infected cuts, and Hattie treated them all with her mother's medicine and her mother's kindness, and charged them whatever they could afford, which was sometimes nothing. She never turned anyone away. Not even Abigail Fenton, who came one February with a child burning with fever and couldn't look Hattie in the eye. "I'm sorry," Abigail whispered, while Hattie pressed a cool cloth to her daughter's forehead. "For what I said, by the fence, all those years." "I know," Hattie said. "Sit down. She'll be fine by morning." Tate went to prison. Whitfield lost his license and left Texas. Barnes resigned and moved to Kansas. The Copperland stayed with Eli, and when the railroad came through in spring, he negotiated his own terms, fair terms, and the Crenshaw name became the richest in the territory. But Eli never cared about the money. He cared about the woman who'd ridden a mule up his mountain and refused to leave. One evening in late autumn, with the sun painting the hills gold and the cattle lowing in the south pasture, Eli came home to find Hattie on the porch. She was sitting in Ruth's old rocking chair, her mother's journal open in her lap, one hand resting on her stomach. The belly that had once been a source of shame now held a different kind of fullness. Eli stopped on the steps. He looked at her hand on her stomach. He looked at her face. "Hattie?" "Eli?" "Are you—" "I am." He sat down next to her, slowly, like a man afraid of waking from a dream. He reached over and placed his scarred hand over hers, over the small, growing life beneath. "I was dead before you came," Eli said quietly. "I was a ghost on a mountain, and you brought me back." "You weren't dead. You were waiting." What was I waiting for? Hattie leaned into him. His arm went around her. She felt the solid strength of him, the warmth, the steady beat of his heart against her shoulder. "Someone stubborn enough to knock on a closed door," she said. Eli laughed, a real laugh, deep and full and free, the laugh of a man who had finally learned that the heaviest hearts carry the most love, and the biggest mountains stand the strongest when the storm comes. And that is the story of Hattie Mae Prescott, the woman they called Buffalo Girl, the woman nobody saw, the woman who rode through the dark on a borrowed mule and saved an old woman's eyes and tore down the most powerful man in Texas with nothing but a mop bucket, a leather journal, and a courage that no corset in the world could contain. She wasn't small. She wasn't quiet. She wasn't what anyone expected. She was the mountain. And the mountain never moved. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It means more than you know. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they are worthy of love, no matter what the world tells them. Subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a new story. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Hattie's place? Would you have knocked on that door? Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, heavy logs burn the longest and hottest. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time.